Hey everyone, in this video I'm going to explain title pages in APA, how to format them, and then at the end of the video I'm going to walk you through creating one using Microsoft Word. So let's go ahead and get started here. Let's start in the middle of the PowerPoint, how about? So for the title page, there's just a couple things that you're going to want to pay attention to. I'll walk you through each one of these, but so notice first we got a page number, we got the paper title here, the author, the affiliation, the course, the instructor, and the due date. And there's very specific rules about how far apart these should be spaced, how they should be presented on the page, etc. So let's go through these rules. So starting with the page number, notice it appears in the upper right corner of the document. So whatever page, whether it's page 1, 2, 3, or 4, it's always going to be in the upper right corner. You don't put any other text. You don't put your name there. That's what we do in MLA. You don't put a running head there. If you don't know what a running head is, don't worry about it. But if you're used to a former edition of APA, like the 6th edition, or you've had APA in a class before where your instructor expected you to provide a running head, it's not required for student papers anymore in the starting with the 7th edition. So you can see the running head in the professional paper example that starts on page 50 if you want to know what that is. But if you take a look at the student example, which I believe starts on page 61, it's right after the professional paper, but you'll find that there's no running head for the student paper. So for research papers, here's what the title should do. So notice, take a look at this title here, Nurturing the Nurses, Reducing Compassion Fatigue Through Resilience Training. So the person who came up with this title, that's a great title, by the way. The person who came up with this title didn't just like pull it out of thin air and be like, ooh, well, what do I want to call this? I want to call my masterpiece Nurturing the Nurses, Reducing Compassion Fatigue. Maybe they came up with the nurturing the nurses part that way. I like the kind of alliteration between nurturing and nurses there. However, the title, whoever came up with this title used these specific criteria to formulate what title they were going to describe their paper with. So the title obviously should state the main topic. It is a title after all. It should identify any variables or issues. So the issues here, you might consider like the issue to be compassion fatigue, right? This would be a variable. A variable would be maybe resilience training. So resilience training is having an effect on compassion fatigue. So we're identifying these things by name. So whatever the variables or issues are, there's probably a key word used in your discipline, whatever discipline you're studying or researching. There's probably a key word that experts use to describe that thing. It's jargon, right? So, I mean, I can understand what compassion fatigue is just from the title of it, right? But it's key to describe it as compassion fatigue if those are the specific words that all the other, nursing experts use to describe this situation. The title should clarify the relationship between those variables. So, for example, a bad title, not a title that needs improvement, would be something like Nurturing the Nurses, Compassion Fatigue and Resilience Training. That sounds like a great title, but what's poor about it is that it doesn't describe the relationship between those two things. So, okay, compassion fatigue and resilience training is that, does compassion fatigue cause resilience training? Like, what's the relationship there? The title should be focused and it should be succinct. So an example of an unfocused title might be something like Nurturing the Nurses, Getting Better at What We Do. That sounds cool. Like, that's nice. Like, I support that. Let's get better at what we do. But what's unfocused about that is that's a very vague description. What we do a lot of things. Like, what does that mean? Getting better. Like, so how are we getting better? By reducing compassion fatigue. It should be succinct too. So maybe there are additional variables or other specifics that we could include here. But we don't want to get too far into the weeds with a title. So that's the tricky thing about a title. It's an interesting critter because it needs to be both specific and general. It needs to be specific through the use of these specific terms, the variables or the issues. But it needs to be general too, in that it covers the breadth of the paper, whatever the topic of the paper is in general terms. The title of a paper should contain no abbreviations. So let's say, for example, you are writing about EEGs, which is a type of a scan done in hospitals. So maybe everybody in the hospital, like everybody calls it an EEG. They don't, in a normal conversation, call it an electroencephalogram. But you would write out in your title electroencephalogram, and you would not write out EEG in a title, because you would write it out EEG in the body of the paper, but for the title it needs to be spelled out, so it's very so that you can search for it, basically. So it's whatever the keyword is, it should be spelled out. So that's how you come up with and formulate like the words for the title. Now, how do we format the title once we come up with our title? We'll notice that the formatting is bold, right? So the text here is bold as opposed to this, which is like plain text, right? The text should be centered. So left and right, we've got even sized margins on both sides. The entire everything is centered here, right? 3 or 4 lines below the top margin. So when I said it was centered a second ago, that's like centered left, right. That's not centered like very center of the page. So it should only be 3 or 4 lines down from the top of the page, not all the way down to the center. And it should be written in title case. Now there's more details about title case on page 167, but let's take a look at what that means. So in title case, you'll notice with the title here, Nurturing the Nurses, notice that the word "the" is not capitalized, even though it's part of a title. Everything else is capitalized, though. Looks pretty much like a title, right? So words like articles, un, or the, are not going to be capitalized in titles. Short conjunctions, and by short, it refers to 3 words or fewer, or sorry, 3 letters or fewer in a word. And conjunctions could be coordinating conjunctions like the fanboys, for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. It could also be subordinating conjunctions, words like if, when, as, since, because. So if any of those conjunctions are 3 or 2 letters long, it's not going to be capitalized. Short prepositions, like any of the ones that you see here. So prepositions are words like these: as, at, by, for, in. There are also longer prepositions, words like through, between. And so if a word is 3 or fewer letters and it's a preposition, don't capitalize it. Other words that are minor words don't need to be capitalized if they are 3 letters or fewer. This is pretty rare because usually in a title, if you've got a word that's 3 letters or fewer, and usually if you have a word that's not going to be capitalized, it's a preposition or a conjunction. And if you have a 3-letter word that is significant in your title, you would still capitalize that. So that's what you don't capitalize. But pay attention to these rules for what you do capitalize. So in addition to capitalizing any nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs, you would capitalize the first word of a title, obviously. So here it's capitalized because it's the word is nurturing. But if the word was a word like the, or from, then that word's going to be capitalized. The first word of a subtitle. The subtitle refers to the second part of a title. We're not talking about Netflix. We're talking about you got a title and then a subtitle. So it's like the second part of the title. It comes after the colon. So that's going to be capitalized. You'll capitalize the first word after a colon, obviously, like I just said. You'll capitalize the first word after an M dash, if you have an M dash in your title. And if you have any end punctuation in your title, like a period, a question mark, an exclamation point, you capitalize the next word the same you would as in a simple ordinary sentence, right? If you have any hyphenated words in your title, like self-reporting, then that both words that make up that hyphenated word, both of those are going to be capitalized. And then any words that are 4 letters or longer, whether it's a preposition, whether it's significant or not, it's all going to get capitalized: with, between, from, etc. So that's the rules for capitalization. These same rules are going to, just to kind of, you might want to remember these, or just, write down, jot them down if it's going to be helpful for you. Remember where to look them up in the book when you need it, because later on we're going to have to be reproducing the titles of the works that we're reading when we do our references page or when we do our annotated bibliography next week. So you're going to want to make sure that you know how to capitalize titles correctly. So when I refer to title case, this is what I'm talking about. The opposite of title case, just for reference sake, is sentence case. We'll be talking about that too. Sentence case is just normal sentence spelling. So capitalize the first word, no other words. So, okay, so we've got the title here. Then notice there's a line break in between that title and then the author. And by line break, I mean there's just an extra blank line. So then the student's name is going to appear next, the author of the paper. So the preferred format is first name, comma, middle initial, and then last name. Oh, sorry, no comma, no comma. Forget I said that. So you just provide the first name, middle initial, and last name. So like Oliver B. Lee. Don't include any professional titles. If you're a doctor or a professor or whatever, it doesn't get included here for the author. You don't include any academic degrees either. So if you have your BA or your PhD or an AA or whatever you've got, that's awesome, but you wouldn't provide that here. You just provide your name simply. If you are a junior or a senior, or if you're the first or the second or the third, there's some suffixes attached to your name, we do not capitalize, or sorry, we do not put a comma before those suffixes in APA formatting, which is not standard. It's not what you normally see in print, but in APA, that's the rule. So that's how you'll format your name. Now, how about the author's affiliation? So your affiliation is just what organization or body you're connected with in some way. So that would be Grays Harbor College. That's where you study. So that second line, it might say Grays Harbor College. If you're producing the paper within a specific department, then you might go ahead and provide that. So you might say maybe, for example, like the Department of Nursing or Department of Humanities or something like that. So for this class, you can just go ahead and put Grays Harbor College because this is an English class, but I think a lot of the students who are taking this class are not actually going to get degrees in humanities. Some of you are, but I think a lot of students taking this class are going to end up getting a degree in a different field, maybe in a natural sciences or health sciences. So this class isn't really a particular, the overlap isn't there, so you wouldn't provide the department in this case. So with the affiliation, let's say you've got multiple institutions that you're a part of. Like let's say that you're a student at Grays Harbor College, but you also work at the local hospital, or you work at the Daily World, or you work for the city of Aberdeen or something like that. In those cases, you wouldn't just like list all your affiliations like you're writing a resume or something like that. You'd only list institutions that contribute substantial support to the study. So for a college paper, that's generally just going to be the college. Now there may be times, so for example, if you're a nursing student and you are doing your clinicals, and so you're maybe going to the hospital every day and you're writing up a report about what you do there at the hospital, in that situation, that's an example where both those institutions are contributing substantially to that study. So then you would list both of them. You shouldn't include more than 2 affiliations in general for a title page. And notice it's just the next line down. So we had an extra space after the title, but everything else is just regular single space. It's regular line breaks, but it's actually, you may have noticed this whole page is double spaced. We'll take a look at that in Microsoft Word in a second. If you want more information about this, go ahead and take a look at page 34. That's where it talks about affiliations. So next line is the course. So you're going to write the course in the abbreviated form used by Grays Harbor College. So for English 235, for example, that's spelled out capital E, capital N, capital G, capital L, ampersand 235. And there's a space between the ampersand and the 235, being very technical here. So that's how you will spell out the class. Then you've got the colon, right? And then the title of the course. In this class, it would be technical writing. In this example one, the nature of nursing practice. So whatever the title of the class is, then you would go ahead and put it here. And you'd write that title in title caps, like we were just talking about, because it's the title of the class, right? So notice the of here is not capitalized. Next, it's going to be your instructor's name. So my name is Tom Stearns. You can simply write Tom Stearns there, and that's fine. But as kind of a general rule for you to think about, like going forward, whatever classes you take after this class, APA's preferred name format is first name for this section of the paper, for the title page where your instructor's name goes. It's going to be just like your name. So Priya C. Agarwal. So just first name, middle initial, last name. And if you don't know your instructor's middle initial, you don't have to like email them and be like, can you tell me your middle initial for the title page? Don't worry about it. Just go with what you know. My middle initial is M, in case you're wondering. You feel free to use that on the title page. You won't get any bonus points though. You're going to include any professional or academic titles when known. That's fine. And this is just kind of like a student paper rule. In general, in APA, there's a lot of times where we are referring to people by their names in the in-text citations. We do it in the references page. Nowhere else in a document do you provide someone's professional or academic title. This is what we were just talking about on the last page. Like if you have a PhD or BA or AA or whatever, none of that is going to appear. This is the only place in APA where it might appear. And just something to keep in mind, not every, and I said this, I think, on the first day of class when we talked about just kind of getting to know each other, not every professor or not every instructor is a professor. Not every instructor has a doctorate and would be addressed as doctor or professor. So if you're not sure, it's absolutely fine to just leave off any titles. But if you do know that the person is a doctor, or if you call the person professor blah 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 all the time and they're a professor, then absolutely that's fine. Last thing on the title page is the due date. And so notice the way that it's written, nice and simple. It's not confusing and weird like MLA is how I feel about that. In APA, it's quite simple. It's what most of us are used to, which is the month spelled out, the date in numerical form, obviously, a comma, and then the year. So March 16, comma, 2020. It wouldn't be March 16th, TH, or ST for first or anything like that. Just March 16, comma, 2020. And that's it. So that's how you format an APA title page. So title pages are standard for all APA papers. Thankfully, this is the day and age of digital classwork, and we're uploading papers. We're not like printing them out and handing them into the instructor generally, so you don't have to worry about wasting a sheet of paper by doing this. So you'll be asked to provide a title page for every assignment in this class, and I do that just to get you guys in the habit. You get it locked down and never forget it. You'll never forget how to do a title page. It's pretty simple. The only exception is for the research matrix assignments, I do not require you guys to do a title page because it's just a different type of activity. You're creating like a matrix with rows and columns. Don't need a title page for that. All right, so with all of that, I'm going to go ahead and take a look at in Microsoft Word. Oops. An earlier start there. And I'll just show you guys how to format the title page for a paper. So